What's up, guys? This is Zach here, bringing you a first impressions video for Defiance, a buy-to-play third-person shooter slash MMO developed by Trion. Defiance is by no means a brand new game. It launched last April alongside the Syfy network series of the same name, both to mixed results. Trion has had about 4 months to patch up Defiance, to clean out any bugs, and to add new content, but much of the original complaints players had at launch remain the same. First of all, is the relatively bare-bones character creation. Character creation is fairly bland. You select between one of a few different archetypes and have very little control over your physical appearance. Once you create a character, you immediately set off on your first mission. Defiance plays not unlike multiplayer Warframe or Mass Effect 3, only in a persistent world. You can take on a wide variety of missions that generally have you shooting lots and lots of bad guys. Defiance takes a page from the Old Republic's book and offers a storyline to go along with the main missions. And also, like the Old Republic, the main story isn't incredibly interesting, although the cutscenes are pretty nice. The main story missions are somewhat varied though, but numerous side missions usually consist of slaughtering mobs or collecting items. Now, having said that, Defiance offers up other content like vehicle races that remind me a lot of the races found in DCUO, and more organic content such as arc falls, which are basically Defiance's version of rifts or dynamic events. Other events pop up around the world, such as defending a group of NPCs or eliminating swarms of mobs. One event has you defending outposts against waves of mobs, and this is probably my favorite encounter, as you can build turrets and upgrade those turrets to help you defend the area. All of this content can range from relatively minor to absolutely massive, depending on how many players are in the area. Reclaiming an outpost from mobs with 20 to 30 other players or completing a massive arcfall is tons of fun, and the game seems to keep a steady frame rate despite all the chaos. All this organic content goes a long way towards breathing life into what is otherwise a fairly static game. There's quite a lot of landscape in Defiance, but little of it has any real purpose. There are no towns or gathering places. NPCs are littered sporadically throughout the map. Now, this is disappointing because while Defiance isn't technically impressive, its game world is fairly interesting to look at, but it seems to be presented in such a bland way that you just find yourself not really caring about it. You'll find that most of your time traversing the landscape is spent barreling over cliffs and launching your four-wheeler in the air, which, by the way, is pretty fun. You can even get rewarded with additional XP for large jumps off cliffs. Graphically, the game is certainly a mixed bag. In terms of textures, the game looks nearly last gen, almost like a late release for the Xbox, but artistically, the game does shine. Environments are imaginative, and armors all look nice, even if armor variety and landscape variety isn't really all that great. Mob variety is a little sparse, at least from what I've seen thus far. There's probably only a handful of varied mobs that you will see at a given time, and the rest are just clones of one another. Now, I have to wonder if the sacrifice in graphics and mob variety has more to do with the game's release on consoles, seeing as the game released on all 3 platforms. Now, given that the game has released on all 3 platforms, I was disappointed to discover that none of the versions are cross-platform. PC players can only play with other PC players, PS3 players can only play with other PS3 players, and Xbox 360 players can only play with other Xbox 360 players. I'm not sure what technicality prevents Trion from releasing the game as cross-platform. My guess is probably the PvP combat, but it's not good for a game that's already not incredibly popular to be forced to split its total player base across 3 different ways. But speaking of cross-platform, menu navigation is a bit of a chore on the PC. Defiance on PC is a straight-up console port with menu navigation designed for a controller rather than a mouse and keyboard. While this is acceptable, I would have preferred a more customized interface for PC players, sort of like in Final Fantasy XIV. I found the menus difficult to navigate, and for the longest time I had no idea how to get rid of items that I didn't need clogging up my inventory space. Aside from the dynamic events and missions, players can also group up for co-op instances, which are essentially Defiance's version of dungeons. Players can automatically queue up for a co-op mission and are instantly transported to the mission location after accepting the invite. I really love this feature, and it goes a long way towards making it extremely easy to instantly jump into all the action. The co-op instances themselves are fairly entertaining. Each of them can be fairly linear, but they do present a group-based challenge. Now, one issue that I do have with the PvE content in general is simply how it scales to each encounter. Now, as I mentioned before, the more players who enter the game world, the larger the event. Well, the problem is that the mobs also become much harder to kill. In a large arcfall or large overworld event, you can enter multiple clips into an enemy before it actually dies, thus making the game feel much more like a traditional MMO than I would like. Defiance is essentially a PvE game, but it does have its fair share of PvP content. First of all, there's the standard team deathmatch style PvP, where players fight for control of capture points, and then there's the Shadow War. Shadow Wars are massive 96-person wars that take place within the open world. Players can queue up for a Shadow War and be instantly transported into the action. I should mention that PvP in Defiance is totally optional. Only by opting into a PvP match do players risk getting killed by other living, breathing individuals. I enjoyed the PvP content in Defiance, but it seemed as if there was a slight bit of lag that often made it difficult to hit enemies as they skated across the screen. Progression in Defiance is a bit interesting. You have a progress skill bar, but there are no levels, at least not traditionally speaking. There are ego points. Ego points are used to add skills from a skill grid that kind of reminds me of the grid from Final Fantasy XII. Completing missions, killing mobs, completing pursuits, which are basically achievements, and mastering a weapon type gain ego points for the player, and the more the points, the stronger the character. There's a wide variety of randomly generated loot found throughout the game world, from drops from mobs to quest rewards. Weapons are varied as well. Players can use assault rifles, sniper rifles, shotguns, and other weapons. Frequently using the same type of weapon makes players more proficient with that weapon. Players can also access grenades and shields. Grenades function like special abilities with a recharge timer rather than a set amount of ammo. Speaking of special abilities, Defiance does give players access to more traditional MMO-centric abilities like special buffs, which provide a cosmetic boost to your character as well as improved attributes such as increased damage, or maybe something like invisibility. The issue with progression in Defiance is that after a while it all feels sort of pointless, even more so than in most MMORPGs. Even though you get more abilities as you level up, the abilities don't really affect your gameplay to a great degree, and you don't get too much of a sense that your character is becoming more and more powerful, quite like you would in a more traditional MMO. On top of that, there's not a whole lot of content at endgame, and the player community is largely non-existent in all facets of the game. Playing Defiance is very close to playing a single-person shooter where you just happen to have other players running around sometimes assisting you. The chat interface is terrible, and as a result it's rarely ever used by anyone. I've probably heard 3 people talking in chat since I've started. For a multiplayer game, this is extremely unfortunate. The game does have clan support though, but I have to wonder how much chatter goes on even within a clan. Defiance is a buy-to-play game, which means it has no monthly fee, but it does have a cash shop. Most of what you can buy in the cash shop is relatively cosmetic, including outfits and vehicles. But you can also buy currency for lockboxes that have a chance to contain in-game loot. Some might consider this pay to win, but I feel the cash shop is relatively unobtrusive compared to some others I've seen. Now, is this game worth $60? No. But the game's no longer being sold for $60 no matter what platform you purchase it on. Defiance is a pretty good game for a buy-to-play title. And at least on the PC, you really can't go wrong with paying $10 for the game client. Trion promises 4 DLC content packs before the game is a year old, and they've just recently released the last one. So you can always play for a while, get bored, then purchase a new DLC and play for a while until you get bored again with no strings attached. So if you want to learn more about Defiance, head on over to the game's official website. If you want to learn more about MMO Attack, head on over to MMOattack.com for more MMO gaming news, reviews, giveaways, opinions, and join our community for access to MMO forums where you can talk MMO with gamers from all over the world.